everybody, for joining us this evening. There's just a few more folks grabbing some drinks and the looks like they're going to be coming up. So just from an administrative piece, restrooms are on us and also upstairs. We have a series of events that are coming together over the next few days. And really, this is one of the keynotes starting this discussion. And I had a chance to meet Chris a year ago when we had the World War II Traveling Memorial on Plaza to mark the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. And this very unassuming, lovely couple come walking up, and I meet them, and he's at 173rd Airborne. I think it might have been his shirt. He might have been wearing. I'm like, oh, did you serve? Little did I know. And then the rest is history. So it's been just wonderful. So, well, 8 months ago, we started talking about doing the talk today. So even before everything that's unfolding in Afghanistan right now was happening, and we knew the 20th anniversary was a significant enough event. This year, the War Memorial, our leadership, our staff, we identified this year as Operation 3020. The reason why we called it that is this is the 30th anniversary of Gulf War, launched in January of this year, and then of course the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And then with that, you have 19 DoD expeditionary ribbons that are authorized over those last 30 years. And so you have everything from Mogadishu, Haiti, Bosnia, all these other conflicts that have our men and women over the last 30 years. So last year we go from the 75th anniversary of World War II to the 3020. So we go from the greatest generation to the latest generation. It's really what we thought we would do, and then building programs around that. So as I said about 8 months ago, Chris, we started talking about community event. We nailed it down tonight, and I want to say just thank you everybody for helping pull this together. I know Kelly, you got a full-time job plus, and our team just thanks you so much for helping and working with us. And also Nicole, because we'll talk about Chris today here, but Nicole, how much can I say? There's those of us who wear uniforms, and there's those who don't wear the uniform, but they're right alongside our men and women in uniform, and that's Nicole. That's all I'm going to say, Nicole. The secret war, the warriors that are there supporting us, and so we're absolutely honored to have both of you, and we look forward to doing other programs together. So it looks like we've got most folks in. So Colonel, if I may, I'd like to introduce retired Army Colonel Chris Kolenda, author of Zero Sum Victory, What We're Getting Wrong About War. Is the first American to have both fought the Taliban as a commander in combat and engaged them in peace talks. Now advises leaders on how to use military lessons to strengthen their businesses and gain diplomatic competitive advantages. And so today, the talk is incredibly appropriate. What we did right, what we did wrong, and what the United States can do going forward. So, Colonel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan, Kelly, for making all of this happen, everybody happen, the War Memorial. I don't know about you, but it's been hard to watch. And a number of you spent time in Afghanistan. And it's just a lot of emotions when you see what's been happening past months. Yeah, I mean, there's like disgust and just bewilderment at we've been fighting this group called the Top 20 years. And then suddenly there's
I'm going to switch it to a handheld. That's okay. I'm sorry about that.
hey, small frictions in these things. Okay.
Should be fine. Try it again.
So this organization, we've been fighting for 20 years. just takes over the country. And you've got Taliban flags flying on US made Humvees and Black Hawk helicopters. You've got throngs of people at the gates of the earth. And then there's also these feelings of anger. We spent $2 trillion over 20 years. Over 2,300 Americans lost their lives in Afghanistan, to include 6 of my own soldiers, 6 of my own paratroopers gave their lives. Thousands and thousands more. And all of this time, all of this investment, all this blood and treasure to support a country that just, a government that simply evaporated almost overnight. And then there's the anxiety and fear. Anxiety about our Afghan friends. Many of my interpreters have not been able to get out. The people who got out of Afghanistan, 128,000 or so, most of them are not interpreters. They're not people who worked for us, the US government, the US military. They're other folks. And I don't begrudge them that at all, but I'm very upset that my interpreters have not been able to get out. And a lot of us are still working to try to help them. We get frantic messages all the time. We'll just, scare the wolves. And in fear, we're going to get another Al-Qaeda city. What about Islamic State? What's all going to happen? And so you got all of these emotions. I think that a lot of us feel who were there in Afghanistan, who were familiar with people that in Afghanistan, who've been watching the news about what's going on. And part of what I found in terms of understanding what to do next is creating some space between emotion and action. So that's a little bit about what we're doing here today. What I want to do is first of all, just identify those emotions. Why would the administration sadly has been very tone deaf about the emotions that Americans feel when they see these news stories. And once you identify them, you create space between emotion and action and figure out what actions you want to take. So how did this all happen? What we saw in August was the military equivalent to the 2008 financial crisis, where you had all of these things, a bunch of incidents, a bunch of things come together that created this cascading effect that resulted in the Taliban taking over and this chaos at the airport. So you had the Afghan government for the last 17 months simply buried its head in the sand after the US Taliban agreement. They didn't prepare their defensive positions. They didn't make sure their soldiers were resupplied, had ammunition, weapons, etc. to defend themselves. You had the Taliban taking advantage of these 17 months and negotiating the surrenders and capitulations of all of these Afghan army units and police units and provinces and districts. And when they began pushing on that, when they began going around collecting those capitulations, everything came together. The Taliban surprised at the success. And then it created this mass panic where the Afghan government simply disintegrated. The Afghan military, we spent so much time and effort building, just disintegrated. And the Taliban swept in, the embassies began to pull out, and when the embassies began to pull out, then we had this mass panic of people trying to get to the airport. So that's what we saw. And it was, all of these different things had to come together to create this disaster. What's been probably the biggest foreign policy disaster in American history. It happened for 3 reasons. The meltdown in Afghanistan happened for 3 reasons. The first one is the Afghan government just simply failed to gain the buy-in. The Afghan government had become what I call a predatory kleptocracy. What that means is it's worse than being corrupt. Corrupt governments will take bribes. This has become a kleptocracy in which the entire government was organized in order to plunder the country. And so government officials, Afghan officials would spend, many of them, would buy their positions. So if you're a brigadier general, you might buy your position for $100,000 US. A police chief in a big province would buy his position for 1 to 2 to 3 years. I was speaking with the Afghan Minister of Finance several years ago, and who was trying to get a handle on this corruption issue, trying to dismantle this kleptocracy. He said, a customs official, somebody at one of the border crossing points, said, guess how much he paid for his position? $1 million. It's like $5 million. He said, $5 million Afghani, which would have been like $100,000. Still a gross amount of money. But $5 million US. He said, imagine how much money they thought they could make. So these are not like you're paying $5 million just out of generosity to the government. You're making a down payment with the expectation that you're going to use your position to turn it. And this became the system of government starting in about 2006. And the different ways they return profits are misappropriating our tax dollars, kidnapping for ransom, land theft, and oftentimes using us, U.S. military, as their bouncers by manipulating intelligence, saying, he's Al-Qaeda, go get it. And so through this process, through these actions, they began to alienate the people and drive them into the arms of the Taliban. And what we saw in August were Afghans voting with their feet away from this government that had been drifting into predatory corruption for the last 15 years. Away from that government and towards the Taliban. The second reason why the Taliban were successful in this set of events unfolded was they were just more innovative. Taliban had the 3 things that they needed for a successful insurgency. First one is they had external sanctuary. They had sanctuary in Pakistan where they could rest, refit, recruit, to gather supplies and logistics. They had also a sanctuary in Iran, both neighboring countries of Afghanistan. Second is they had enough internal support within the country among Afghans to field a team on the battlefield. More Afghans admitted to supporting the Taliban than voted in the last Afghan presidential election. And then third, the Taliban were just simply more innovative than the Afghan government was, and then we were, quite frankly. And you can only coast downhill. The Afghan government was coasting downhill, they were drifting downhill into this predatory corruption. And we were of the mind that we could simply do the same things over and over and over again and expect the same results. And if you try to stay still while your adversary is innovating, then you're falling further behind. And so politically, militarily, diplomatically, the Taliban were innovating much more effectively than were the Afghan government, than was the United States and the international allies. And then third, and this is going to be hard to hear, we were not very good partners. Despite all of the resources and the sacrifices that we made to help this government succeed. At the early part of the war, we in many ways lost our moral and strategic direction. Torture at places like Bagram and Guantanamo. When I was out in the field talking with people who had been fighting us, I asked them, how do you feel? They were talking about civilian casualties. They were talking about Bagram. In 2001, the Taliban offered to surrender. And you can look up a press conference, December 7th, 2001, between Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld and interim Afghan President Hamid Karzai, where this subject comes up. And Rumsfeld says, no, we will not accept their surrender. These people need to be hunted down. That may have been forgivable September 11th. A lot of emotions in America at that time would have been difficult politically, maybe to accept the surrender. We just don't think. We weren't thinking. A couple of years later, in 2003, the Taliban essentially offered the same. We'd like to live in peace. Stop it. And once again, we in the Afghan government said, in 2011, the Taliban, or 2010, the Taliban began reaching out again, saying we want to talk to the United States. This is when we had 100,000 American troops. We want to talk to the Americans. And I was the Secretary of Defense's personal representative in those talks that started in 2011 to 2013. And the Taliban's demands for sitting down with the Afghan government in talks were very modest. They wanted the 5 guys in the Guantanamo, wanted a political office, and we had our demands again too. And we as a government just simply could not get around. And those talks go on. Then our leverage was the highest, and they were sabotaged both within the US government and by the Afghan government, who said if we need to, quote, negotiate from a position of strength. We have 100,000 troops. So we lost that opportunity as well. And when you beam forward then 7 years later, we are in a position, because of the other 2 issues I mentioned, of the Afghan government failing to be buying from the people and the Taliban having what it needed to be successful. By 2020, the United States is in a position where we are negotiating an agreement with the Taliban that trades a total troop withdrawal or Taliban promises to not let Al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups stage attacks against the United States. A far cry from surrender and a far cry from just a few honest agreements, but we continue to live the breach. Sort of like the kid putting their hand in a cookie jar and trying to take out all the cookies, and it winds up with nothing. Another way that we were very good partners is we didn't ignore the corruption. In part because we didn't understand how it was working. Part of it was mirror imaging. We become public servants in America because we want to serve Americans. Doesn't matter if you're joining the military, if you're joining, the city council, you do that to serve other Americans, to serve your community. In a kleptocracy, the calculus is totally different. You serve in order to plunder. But because we were mirror imaging, we didn't see this happen. We didn't see the fact that Afghan military commanders were selling ammunition and fuel and food on the black market. Whereas the Afghan military had 300,000 soldiers on paper, they had maybe a third of that in reality. Two-thirds of that were ghost soldiers who existed only on paper so the commanders could feed themselves. So we ignored the corruption problem, in part because we didn't understand it, and in part because we didn't know what to do about it. That was so ingrained that we didn't know what to do about it, and feared that dealing with the issue might make things actually worse than they were. And then finally, on not being great partners, is we created a security force of such dependency on us and on our firepower and our logistics and guidance and support that it was unable, it didn't have the confidence to stand on its own. And I find that unacceptable. I find that to be strategic malpractice. It's our job to help our partners be the best versions of themselves and not to create enemies that are dependent on us so we can stay there. That's what we did. And so the whole thing collapsed like accident. So what do we do now? So that's why we are where we are in a nutshell. So what do we do now? Well, I think the United States right now has three main objectives, near-term objectives in Afghanistan. The first one is to continue the evacuation of U.S. citizens and Afghans who worked for us as our interpreters, as people who worked on the outpost, continue to help them evacuate the country. Second is the humanitarian rights or humanitarian issues and human rights. Afghanistan has 20 million people on the edge of starvation. 20 million people. It's one of the only two countries in the world which still have polluted. And its economy is cratering because it doesn't have any access to foreign reserves right now, to any of its money. And you haven't had a functioning government in over a month. You don't function, no functioning banking system. And so you've got this humanitarian crisis, you've got this economic collapse happening, and you've got, of course, all the human rights concerns that we have. Women's rights, rights of all Afghans, regardless of their ethnicity. And if Afghanistan sort of tears itself apart in warring fiefdoms, tears itself apart into a new civil war, then those problems, of course, get worse. As is our third objective, which is counterterrorism. We want to make sure that Afghanistan is no longer a safe haven for terrorism. That organizations like Islamic State, Khorasan, ISIS, that's what it is, Islamic State, Khorasan province, Islamic State, Khorasan, that's what we call Afghanistan. Them and Al Qaeda, we don't want them back in the country in safety. And so the question is, are we more likely to gain those three objectives by turning our backs on Afghanistan administration, or by continuing to engage with whatever government the Afghans come up with a great interim government. It's a lot like Taliban seeking leadership. And we'll see how long that lasts and therefore when it transitions to something that's more representative. But I think we're better off as Americans staying engaged with Afghanistan, maybe having to hold our nose while we do that, then turning our backs in frustration. Because if we turn our backs in frustration and Afghanistan becomes this civil war, that is the most likely scenario when Al Qaeda and others are going to get a safe haven. Okay, so that's a rapid overview of this meltdown we've been watching. In terms of like leadership takeaways, there are a few that I'd offer. The first one is the importance of buy-in. When people have buy-in, it doesn't matter if it's a government or it's a company or a military. When people have buy-in, they're going to give you their discretionary power. When people have buy-in, they are going to do the right things the right ways without you having to. When you don't have buy-in, people are going to vote with their feet. The second one is about innovation. Innovation is applied engineering. And organizations that are innovating with their people, helping their people be better off, their products and their processes, are the ones that are going to continue to move upwards. The ones that are coasting, thinking that they can do the same thing over and over again and expect and get the same results, are the complacent ones, the blockbusters in that case. Which leads then to insight number 3, which is the importance of stopping drift when you see it. So by drift, what I mean is if this is where you want to be. Drift is the coasting downhill, creating the hypnotic habits that enable you to coast downhill. And drift is like compounding interest. The longer it goes on, the further you get away from where you to be successful. And so it's vital to nip drift in the bud. And we've done that with Afghanistan as good partners. Stop it, saw the corruption and take action against it. Or quickly, you wouldn't have created this sort of monster state that we have in the third most corrupt country in the world, consistently. Yeah, and we bangled it. And the fourth takeaway, is about being good partners. Good partners, just like good leaders, help people be the best versions of themselves. And don't try to turn them into mini-me's, don't try to turn them into people that they are not, but help people be their best selves. And so that when we part ways, whether it's as a consultant to client or as leader to subordinate, when we part ways, the people that we were serving are able to soar to new heights and not crash into them. So we write about all of those things in this book, Leadership, the Warrior's Art. So it's a book that's been in print for 20 years. Like 60,000 plus people use it for their leader development, which is, really cool. And this is a second edition, literally hot off the press. And they just arrived a week ago. 22 chapters, all updated. And so a number of you have already pre-bought them. We've got some more in case folks want them. All those lessons and many more are in that book. And lots of really talented people wrote chapters for the book, which is I am going to pause there and ask your questions about Afghanistan, what I spoke with, what I spoke about, whatever it is.
So Chris, I'll be Phil Donahue, if I can use that reference point. We're getting another microphone. And then, so just raise your hand if you'd like. We want to make sure we get you on the mic because we are recording this as well. And so just a few seconds. because of your hot pocket, that was my mic initially, so it's okay. I think we can adapt and overcome. Hello? Oh. Or high speed. No pressure field. Good to go? Here we go.
There we go. I've got a hand. Okay, we'll start. And I'll start. Looks like we're gonna have a while there, right? We need a bigger boat, as he said in John. So we go.
Thank you very much for your time. You mentioned a good point. So you have to sell it. How come the United States, the most powerful nation in the world, which has to work with educational institution, which mostly have the best military, they are not good at selling it in and getting ahead of the curve before we get offside?
It's one of the, it's a great question. It's one of the things that I write about, Zero Sum Picture, which is my book coming out at the end of October. And it talks about why are these interventions, why do they keep turning into migrants? I mean, when you think about it, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, the list goes on. I mean, they all turn into these disasters. And I mean, it's not okay. It's not okay to be at war for 20 years against a ragtag group of militants. It's not okay to completely upend a country and just simply walk away. But we keep doing this over and over again. Now, definition of insanity, do the same thing over and over again, expect different results. Well, that's what we can do. And it's time for the madness system. I hope President Biden will use the opportunity of the 20th anniversary of September 11th to announce a 9/11 Commission style blue ribbon panel to take a look at why our interventions continue turning into quagmires and recommend the national security reforms to fix this, because it is not acceptable.
Quick question. You had stated before that back in 2001, we were almost going to be out of here. And now we're having a major crisis, you said, with 20 million Afghan individuals at risk for truly losing out on food crisis that's going on. Can you elaborate more on that, please?
Yeah, Afghanistan is a country of about 35 million people. 2/3 of them, so 67%, according to the UN, are facing acute, what they call food crisis. Essentially, you know, many of them at the edge of starvation. You've got, and it's getting worse because the economy is just simply, you know, it's ground to halt. That's what the situation is. So you've seen a lot of progress. I don't want to be a total negative. You've seen a lot of things happen in places like Colorado. I mean, if there's a silver lining in all of this, you don't see these beautiful cities, Colorado, Herat, Mazar-i-Sharif, Kandahar. You don't see them roll. You don't see bloodbaths in the streets. They don't look like Mosul after the battle with ISIS. So the silver lining is Afghan government capitulating, which you don't have. So it could be much worse, actually, than it is. And I think we've got, we contributed to this situation right now. And we've got I think we've got an obligation to do what we can to help the Afghan authorities remedy or at least ameliorate it. I don't know what this new is going to look like. I think we need to condition our relationship based on what they do and not what they say, and certainly not based on a lot of the misinformation, fake news that comes out of Afghanistan.
I'll go to the end here, Georgia, right back. One, two.
Chris, thanks for a wonderful presentation on a not wonderful topic. As somebody that was not just a warrior there, but was also a peacemaker, a occular. So you sort of know both sides more than almost anybody. The reports are that Chinese and Russians are noting our vacuum are now making inroads, and they're going to be the trusted partner to the Taliban. Do you have a sense for the way Afghans in general, and the Taliban in particular, are oriented towards those two countries in our absence? Are they going to be welcoming that?
I actually had a question similar to this when I was speaking with the Taliban senior leader in 2011. So as part of these talks, we were doing a one-on-one before I think it was after this. And I said, what do you want? Let me understand, what do you want? And he said, if we were a government once, and we were cut off from the international community, and our only source of funding was an Al-Qaeda. And we all know how that worked. And we don't want to see that movie again. So he said, when we come back into government, these were even in 2011, when we come back into government, we want to have a relationship with the outside world. In order for Afghanistan to survive, he said it needs support from others. For Afghanistan to thrive, it needs support from the West. And that's why we want to build a relationship. I found that to be very interesting. I asked another Taliban student, so he beamed forward 6 years later as part of some unofficial talks to try to get the 2019 talks going. And I asked the head of the Taliban political commission, talking before me, this is a similar question, what do you want? And he looks at me, he raises his coffee cup, and he says, cappuccino and milk. I said, what? He said, cappuccino and milk. Well, help me understand this. He said, I want to be able to sit in cafe at an outdoor cafe with my wife, drink a cappuccino, and not have to worry about it. He said, we're worried our country's going to become another Syria. So why are you reaching out to us? Why now? He said, we're worried about our country becoming another Syria. That's what we're all talking about. So, I mean, these are the Taliban's version of different. They also have, I've met with Taliban of all walks of life, from the wild-eyed lunatics that you can imagine to their version of diplomats, relatively, decent people who think they're fighting for the right cause, and everything in between.
Chris, the last 3 days, it's been a transition in position for the United States. And my question to you is, there's $9 billion Afghan money. I'm wondering if that's what's being initiated here. It was to use some of that money to pass it back to get this operation like further, bringing people out. Just wondering how quietly that's going to be accomplished, or whether you ever know something about it.
It's hard to say. I mean, it's heartbreaking. We've got one of the very biggest accomplishments in the last 20 years has been girls' education. In 2001, 800,000 Afghan kids were in school, and none of them were girls. 10 years later, you've got 8 million kids in school in 30 years. I remember being in out in the east, and we'd be getting rockets from this ridge line on the other side of the river. And it was getting really old. 107 millimeter rocket can launch shrapnel from the length of the stream. It's deadly. They weren't very accurate, but some would hit that. Finally, we said, you know what, we need to do something. Let's get home. And so we got really good advice from that and said, I would just go talk to him. So he takes his battalion, and they were able to get across the very narrow bridges in their pickup trucks with them. And he comes back at the end of the day. I said, what'd you find out? He said, well, yeah, they're the ones shooting rockets at you. Or shooting rockets. So you find out why. He said, well, it's because a couple of years ago, some special forces and militias came and did a raid in the middle of the night in their houses. Allegedly stolen his jewelry, whatever. Everybody felt dishonored, and so in order to get revenge, they shoot rockets. Okay. I understand that. I mean, if the North Korean army came into my neighborhood and started shooting the place up, I know where I'd be like Red Dawn. And Afghanistan, not this. So I can understand that. What else should I do? So, and it should be in school, and it's just a 3-wall building, no roof. And there's like one little chalkboard and one piece of chalk. The boy or the girls go in the morning, the boys go in the afternoon. There's 200 boys, 150 girls. And most of them, they can't do it on the chalkboard all at once, and so they've got to write their numbers and letters in a dirt stick. Really don't think it's we've been collecting school supplies for when people say, hey, what do you need? Just don't say this name. Say this name looks a mess. It's like building relationships with people. And so we have these containers. And I asked the battalion commander, I said, hey, would you do more for that? He says, oh, yeah. So we loaded up his trucks a couple days later, loaded up his trucks. Notebooks and pens. Comes back at the end of the day, they were very happy. The next morning, I get a call from the front gate. Sir, a bunch of elders here to see you. Wasn't expecting, right? Where are they from? He says, they're from South. The village that we just given notice. And so we brought them all in the room, meeting everybody, and the head elder hands me a stack of papers. What's this? He said, these are the thank you letters from our children, written on the notebooks and pens that you were given. There would be more, he said. But most of the kids didn't feel like their handwriting. And no more rockets. We eventually worked together to build a school there. These kids are still going to schools instead. So, those are some examples, anecdotes of things that have gone well in Afghanistan. Things that maybe we don't hear about, or whether we get some of this money moving to help Afghans and make sure it gets in the right hands. And I think these are all really important issues that I'm confident our folks are working through, but there's no easy answers.
You mentioned that many of the people being evacuated from Afghanistan were Afghans, were not the Afghans who had helped the U.S. military effort, the interpreters and others. Then who are they? And in your judgment, are they being properly vetted before being allowed into the U.S.?
Yeah, the second question I think is yes. They're not national security threats. Most of them are, you've got some who were Afghan commandos, the last units that were sort of intact, if you will, and they were finally guarding the airport, and them and their families got out. That's a fairly sizable portion. Some are here in the United States, some are elsewhere. Others are people who, quite frankly, were able to bribe their way into the airport that way. Some are people who were connected with powerful U.S. and international persons who were able to get their names on convoy lists and get on the buses and get into the airport. And then some are interpreters. One of my interpreters is former interpreters up in Fort McCoy. Cole and I are going to go visit this weekend. Another one's in Fort Lee, Virginia. But there were very few that got out interpreters. So I think the Biden administration needs to continue to focus on this and helping this. I don't begrudge anybody getting out of Afghanistan who felt their lives were in danger. It's just the ones that got out weren't necessarily the ones that we didn't set priorities to make sure that the special visa population who worked with us were the ones that were getting through first, and oftentimes they're not. And it makes my blood boil, and I will continue asking the Obama or the Biden administration to do the right thing. Could you hit the next slide?
Absolutely.
These are some ways to help Afghan refugees. So these are some Wisconsin-based entities where we can help Afghan refugees. So I'll just give you a chance to check those out. Lutheran Social Services, International Institute of Wisconsin, World Relief, Fox Valley, and Jewish Social Services.
Chris, I had heard Catholic Services in La Crosse with direct association back to the command at Fort McCoy. Have you heard that as well?
I know, Nicole, I haven't.
I know that was in the news.
It's probably true.
Okay. You do have a question here as well.
I have two questions. First, before I ask, there's no right or wrong answer. But do you believe your role in military actions was work in Afghanistan? And then the second question, what type of leadership skills do you need to maintain in
I'll answer the second question first. I think empathy is the leadership skill that we need. And it's often been in short supply in the United States in how we work with other countries. Different countries, different cultures, and view the world differently. And that's not bad. I found our unit was like the only ones in the 20-year history of the war to motivate a large insurgent group and several small insurgent groups to stop fighting and join them. And a lot of it just had to start with understanding somebody else's point of view. And empathy is hard. We tend to privilege our own point of view. It's much easier for us to see things from our point of view and to discount people's point of view. And I found that just building relationships and understanding how people view what their interests and judges, how they're interpreting their actions. Can go a long ways to building the bridges that you need to be successful. I'm going to take your first question, and could you go to the next slide? And, that one. 6 of my soldiers were killed in action in Afghanistan. And these are them. Dave Boris, Captain Dave Boris, was killed in, I knew Dave longer than anybody I knew. I've known him for about 5 or 6 years at that point in 2007. We had worked together before, and Dave was like a little relative. A dear friend, he sent a picture with his wife, Jamie, and on November 12th of 2007, Dave was leading a patrol when his vehicle struck an improvised explosive device. And along with Dave was Adrian Hike, was the gunner on Dave's Humvee. So Sergeant Adrian was the first person I ever pinned him up. So he'd just come back from Iraq, and he was awarded, he had a Purple Heart, and I remember pinning the Purple Heart, wounded him. And Adrian went through a lot of post-traumatic stress. He'd seen some pretty nasty fighting in Iraq. He had nobody comes away from combat unaffected. And you can imagine, the drinking and other things. And he got himself in some trouble. Eventually, I had to bust him down in private. And Adrian got the help he needed, got the support he needed, worked his way back up to sergeant. Never been so proud of himself. And he was killed that day, November 12th, 2007. Tom Bostic, then Captain Tom Bostic, was best down that we had ever met. On July 27th of 2007, we were in a big firefight. He was leading his troop, B Troop, and it was the biggest firefight we ever had. And Tom, of course, masterful in coordinating airstrikes and artillery, so things. After about 3 hours, this firefight, things kind of died down. And I remember talking to Tom on the radio. Bulldog 6, this is Sabre 6. Bulldog 6. Bulldog 6 is Sabre 6. What's the situation? And Tom gives me an update, tells me what's been going on. They're doing some casualty evacuation, a couple guys wounded. What he's getting ready to do next. And there was this silence descending on the mountain. That's when I heard it. I can still hear it in my head. It's just gigantic boom that echoes down the mountain. And the whole firefight erupted. Even greater intensity. And I hear this transmission coming across one of the radios saying CP is dead. So CP meant command post, which meant Tom was under direction. So, I gave it a while to show my lesson. So I gave it a bit. Except for radio. Bulldog 6 is Sabre 6. Bulldog 6 is Sabre 6. Silence. Bulldog 6 is Sabre 6. Now, what I heard next, on the one hand, made me very proud. Tom's sergeants and his lieutenants are coordinating with one another, bringing in air artillery, taking the fight to the enemy, just like Tom and Tom learned. On the other level, when this big enemy attack resurfaced, they were right on top of Tom and his command post. And Tom had 4 other soldiers with him. Tom told those 4 soldiers to move to a better location. And Tom single-handedly took on this enemy force. And the boom I heard was a rocket-propelled grenade. Tom was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the nation's second highest medal. Staff Sergeant Ryan Pritchett was in his first patrol as a squad leader on that same day, killed a couple hundred meters from Tom. Ryan, the all-American person, and he was on the unit staff for a while. I got to know Ryan and his wife Brandy, and really, really proud of him. He was followed. Jacob Lowell was our first soldier who was killed in action. He was on also a gunner was on a patrol, and that got ambushed by insurgents, and Jacob got shot. And instead of going down, he got back up on his gun and continued to engage the enemy. Is the word that Barnes talking about. He's buried in Elwood, Illinois, just south. And then Chris Pfeiffer was shot on August 25th, 2007. The bullet went just missed his body. Went into his side and nicked his throat. And he began bleeding, of course, internally. Very hard. Stop that. We eventually got him evacuated to the main outpost. I think Kelly over there, and I helped bring Chris. Kelly over there was my chaplain. One of the people that gave both me and all of our people sang during that time. Helped bring Chris from the helicopter to the aid station. And I remember him sitting up and sort of looking at me. You could tell we're saying words of encouragement to him. He's looking at us and knows where the sound is coming from. Can't see it. You just tell her in his eyes. He's losing so much blood that the doctors called for everybody. They weren't on blood bags. Doctors called for anybody who's donating blood time to line up, give blood, and like 40 people donated blood. Finally get him stabilized. Get him eventually to San Antonio, where he's hanging on. His wife, Erin, meets him. She's 9 months pregnant. Chris dies of wounds September 25th, and their daughter Peyton was 4 weeks. People ask me, did they die? No one just asks that question. And nobody can ever take away the burden that she fought. How they kept faith with one another, how they were doing the things that they love to do when people were doing. Nobody can ever take away the impact that they had on their lives. We helped thousands and thousands of kids in school that they never would have had. We treated tens of thousands of athletes at our aid stations. We helped them build roads and put together electricity. Nobody. No corrupt Afghan politician or bad strategic decision that a USC did ever take the brain and the persistence. And however long employment. So policies might have been in vain. Some of the investments might have been, but their service and their sacrifice never was, never will be. Can you go to the next slide? So I've been wanting to do something for several years, which is visit all of their grave sites. And But, just driving next time. So I wanted to pedal a bike. I hadn't pedaled a bike in like 20 years, but this year I said, you know what? If I don't do it, who's going to do it? If I don't do it now, I bought a bike, trained my butt up. And this is where the Mulberry Surface Viper in Nebraska and all the way to Tombos in the Arlington National Cemetery. It's 1,689 miles. Pedaled that in October of 2022. Also, as a part of their legacy, what I wanted to do is not just pedal it, but raise, create leadership moments in their names, so their legacies can continue to give back to Americans in perpetuity. So you go to the next one. I'm going to do this to support 2 scholarship foundations. One for what's called the Sky Soldiers Foundation, which is my military community, the 173rd Airborne, and the other one to support kids, young people here in Milwaukee with the Milwaukee Rotary Scholarship. So those are the 2 endowments that we're going to raise funds for, and they're going to be in their names, so their legacies are going to live on. So thank you very much for being with me tonight, and let me talk a little bit about Afghanistan, and most importantly about these 6 people.
So, what are we drawing for? I'm not aware of this.
Oh, it's a roundtable discussion here at the War Memorial Center with Chris.
Oh, a roundtable discussion here at the War Memorial Center with Chris.
You have to be present to win. So Darren Miller.
Mhm.
I know Darren, I know you couldn't make it.
Mm.
So we'll let.
Okay. Perfect.
So Darren Miller.
George Banda.
Member of our Orange Well, it's your time, sir. We're happy to host it.
George Banda.
Extra lucky.
He was active.
Tom Sturridge.
All
right.
Yeah, wonderful.
So I know you have a number of books back there on the table, and there are additional books that people were purchasing in advance. So you have them there, and then also you have additional books. So if others are interested,
$20 book. So if you want a book, $20, demo, cash, whatever.
okay. And is the bar still downstairs?
Yep.
So we've got the cocktail hour still open downstairs. We got book signing here. And I just want to thank everybody who's here in person and also who zoomed in. We had 30 people logging in and live streaming. So thank you. And I think we should do more of these, right? So thank you very much for coming. So, okay. Back table. Can we get you a beverage, by chance? Do you need a